Hi, my name is Lennie Goodings, and I am the author of A Bite of the Apple, A Life with Books, Writers, and Virago, which I've just recently published with Oxford University Press. And it seems to many of writers, many publishers, that this is the time when we're really turning to books for sustenance and for courage. And so I'd like to read you a few bits from my book. And I want to start with Maya Angelou. So Virago, where I work, we were her publishers in 1984. In 1984, Maya Angelou came into our lives at Virago. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings had never been published in the UK, despite it being well known in America since its publication as far back as 1969. Maya Angelou told us that her memoir had been sent to British publishers in the 70s, but they had all turned down, saying nobody would be interested in the story of a young black girl growing up in the American South. She loved us for taking a chance on her, characterizing us as her small and feisty English publishers. As we grew to know her, we came to understand that she highly prized courage and loyalty. "I've got your back," was what she often said to us. We published all 7 of Maya Angelou memoirs, her essays, volumes of poetry, even a cookbook. And over the next few years, she came often to Britain. We watched as the country fell deeply in love with her. She captured every size and shape of heart, old, young, ignorant, wise, proud, and shy. When I first took her around the UK, I saw that it was as if people were thirsting for her. They drank deeply of her words and felt lifted by her spirit. They flocked to her, at times weeping, literally wanting to touch her hem. At other times, shouting with the pleasure of seeing a 6-foot-tall woman dance across a stage, unashamedly, outrageously, sexily, head tipped back, with a huge infectious laugh. She would say, "My mission in life is not merely to survive, but to thrive, and do so with some passion, some compassion, some humor, some style." She was in the mold of the people who inspired her. She was a preacher with a sermon, writing and speaking, as she said, with the rhythms and imagery of the good Southern black preachers, and she was a teacher with a lesson. She would often say, "I speak to the black experience, but I'm always talking about the human condition. We are more alike than unlike," was her very powerful mantra. Maya Angelou believed in poetry. She trusted in it, and she used to say that she knew from a young age that you could live by its strengths. The grandmother who raised her, and whom she called Mama, said to the little Maya, "Sister, Mama loves to see you read poetry because that'll put starch in your backbone." I was going to say that last line again because it's so good. "Sister, Mama loves to see you read poetry because that will put starch in your backbone." Another writer of ours who loved poetry was Shirley Hazard. I also have very fond memories of her, and I want to read you a little bit from that. The late Shirley Hazard, author of most exquisite novels, including Transit of Venus and The Great Fire, understood that when we read deeply, we give ourselves over to a novel. She called it, a really wonderful phrase, in part an act of submission, akin to generosity or love. Shirley was with us when The Great Fire was shortlisted for the Orange Prize, and while she was in London, she received the marvellous news she'd also won the prestigious Miles Franklin Award in Australia. She couldn't be there, but she wrote an acceptance speech to be read out, which I typed and sent by email. I remember the care with which she pored over the speech, rewriting, carefully choosing her words to capture the exactness of her feelings. She wrote, "Our world that seems charged with war is also the world in which the frail filament of expression miraculously persists, and the phenomenon of the accurate word. Thanks to this mystery of art and diverse beauty, we can meet in affinity across oceans and continents and centuries and celebrate books." I love that expression, a frail filament of expression miraculously persisting. It's a beautiful mirroring of Shirley and her writing. Carefully dressed, high-neck blouses, a pretty brooch at her throat, hair pinned in a loose, elegant bun, and with lovely, long, expressive hands. I see her now as she rode with me in the back of taxis, wandering at London, quoting strands of poetry, both of us delighting in our friendship. Her novels and her book about Graham Greene are robust beauties, deceptively delicate, just like her. I'm recording this in my study, and outside I can hear children laughing and screaming. It's very nice. Margaret Atwood, who we published for a long time, it's in 1979, has a party trick. She can read palms. And I was once with her and Beryl Bainbridge in a pub after they'd both done their turns at a literary festival. Margaret took Beryl's hand, to Beryl's mild consternation, and after studying it for a little while, she looked at her fellow writer in the eye and she said, "You're not as scatty as you make out." Here is a storyteller not afraid to go beyond the obvious, even in real life, and to tell the truth. The power of good and truthful writing is important to Margaret Atwood. She says, "I happen to believe that at its best, writing is considerably more and other than mere self-expression. Good writing is not expressing yourself, it's opening yourself, discarding yourself, so that the language in the world may be evoked through you. Evocation is quite different from expression. Evocation, calling up, is what writing does for the reader. Writing is also a kind of soothsaying, a truth-telling. It's a naming of the world, a reverse incarnation, the flesh becoming word. It's also a witnessing. Come with me, the writer is saying to the reader. There's a story I have to tell you. There's something you need to know. The writer is both an eyewitness and an eyewitness. The writer bears witness. Bearing witness is not the same as self-expression." This is obviously particularly true in some ways to Margaret Atwood in her own version of soothsaying, but I think her point is larger and applicable to all writers. In a packed hall in North London, a white, middle-aged man stands up. Besuited, he stands out in the casually dressed group. He waits for a microphone to be handed to him, and then he turns to Marilyn Robinson. "Your books changed my life." In Ledbury, at a library event, part of a literary festival, I give a talk about Virago, and then afterwards, while I'm packing up the books, a small, dark-haired, late middle-aged woman quietly comes up to me. "The Virago Modern Classics saved my life." "Your novels give me steely courage." People have often written like that to Sarah Waters, to tell them how deeply she has affected them. Reading takes you outward. Reading gives us entertainment, education, information, escapism, fun, wisdom. Its nourishment gives it strength, from humor or from recognition, or from fellow feeling. And it gives us knowledge, but so often it's also much more than that. It gives us the bravery to allow ourselves to be inspired. Is it surprising to hear how people have gained strength, companionship, or a deeper knowledge of themselves through reading? I don't think so. I think part of the courage a reader draws is from a perception that the writers themselves had the bravery to write openly and honestly, even in fiction. As Sarah Waters says, we write best when we write about what is closest to our hearts. Readers feel that. Sometimes it's a matter of books reaching into lonely lives, and sometimes, aside from giving great pleasure, books are also a validation. Marilyn Robinson has talked many times of the wonder of each of us. She writes, "To be human is a very high and complicated privilege," which implies not only that we have to be validated individually, but also, importantly, that we have obligations, that we're part of a community. And I'm proud to be part of the community of books and publishers, things that I think make such a difference to us now. Thank you.